It's kind of interesting to look at how the Battlefield franchise has changed since it became essentially a mainstream title. Before Battlefield 3, Battlefield definitely had its popularity, but you wouldn't put it on the same pedestal as something like Call of Duty when it came to its mass appeal, I would say. But Battlefield 3 then came out in October of 2011, and it currently still, even after 8 years, the best-selling Battlefield game to date. Something like nearly 5 million copies within its first couple of weeks, I believe. But the reason I wanted to talk about Battlefield today is just because I find it incredible how DICE, especially this entire generation, and not just with Battlefield, but even their other games, have completely lost any competence when it comes to making single player campaigns. Now, I fully understand that Battlefield has and always probably will be, first and foremost, a multiplayer game. I fully understand that that's the reason why most people buy Battlefield, is for the multiplayer, and that's fine. But that does not excuse Battlefield to have basically ever since Battlefield 3, with the exception of one game, which I'm going to talk about soon, that does not excuse it to have such utterly atrocious single player campaigns. Now, the funny thing is, my first experience with Battlefield was with Battlefield Bad Company, even though I didn't play it until about 3 years after it came out. It was literally the first game I bought for my PlayStation 3. And I remember I just adored it. I loved it. And this was a single player. And the thing is, even to this day, Battlefield Bad Company, still throughout the Battlefield series, has the best single player campaign by a country mile. Even Bad Company 2 doesn't match it. I mean, what was there to like about Bad Company 1? It had probably some of the best characters I've seen in an FPS game, Sweetwater, Haggard, Preston, Sergeant Redford. They're all such great characters, as well as she's like the dispatch girl or whatever it is, who's quite funny. Even though the actual story itself was a bit like, oh, whatever, but the personality of the game just was so strong. As soon as you get to the main menu, as soon as you listen to the jazz track, it's actually The Beast by Milt Buckner, it's from 1951, that still to me is one of the best moments I've experienced in an FPS game. Is just the menu music for one particular level. It's just so laid back, and there's so much charm to Battlefield Bad Company 1, which has been so lost for all except one game ever since then, really. Because, to put it simply, I love Bad Company 1. Bad Company 2 came out. Now, I'll be honest, when I first played it, I actually didn't like it very much, but I did try it again, and I did start to enjoy it more. I think Bad Company 2 has a good campaign, but not a fantastic one like the first Bad Company. I mean, there were certain things that were improved over Bad Company 1, like obviously the graphics were better. The destruction was taken even further, how you could demolish entire buildings. Also, the environmental variety. There was a lot of environments in Bad Company 2. In Bad Company 1, it was more just like farmlands and, grass and military places, and, it looked fairly similar. To me, that didn't detract from the experience. Bad Company 2, however, has lots of rainforest, it has the desert, it has abandoned towns, it has inner cities, and even the final mission, which takes place inside an airplane. That sort of stuff is cool. I will say the scripting got a bit annoying in Bad Company 2, and it could sometimes lead to unnecessary deaths from what I remember. But generally, even though it was a lot more linear, I still enjoyed Bad Company 2 because the characters did return, and even though they weren't quite as funny, it still felt like it was, it was a decent campaign. It was a campaign worth playing. I still got all the trophies except for one, and, I had a good time. Then Battlefield 3 came out. Oh boy, Battlefield 3. A colossal disaster would be an understatement, because I have not experienced such an atrocious first-person shooter campaign from start to finish in my 12 years of playing video games. It is basically everything that's wrong with modern military shooters. It is. I cannot think of a single thing in the campaign that makes it worth playing. Because all of the good elements, some people say, oh, well, the graphics are great. The graphical fidelity is fantastic and holds up really well. That's true. That's also in the multiplayer. Oh, the gunplay is solid and the controls are solid and the game runs well. Again, all in the multiplayer. And you could say maybe the same for the sound design. But everything that you can't experience in the multiplayer that's in the campaign is trash. It is absolute fucking garbage. Where to start? So, first of all, if you thought Bad Company 2 was linear, Battlefield 3 takes linear and creates I would say, a sick perversion of of the concept, because to say this game is scripted would be a complete understatement. It does not trust you to do anything. Take in mind, I've enjoyed, say, certain Call of Duty campaigns, and they're quite scripted as well. But the thing about those campaigns is that they tended to have likable characters, they tended to have a variety of environments, they tended to be a bit over the top and silly in some ways. They had things going for them that made it more enjoyable. Battlefield 3, all of the weapons feel the same. All of the characters look exactly the same. I cannot remember a single person's name in this campaign except for the person you play as. The story is generic and garbage. And usually I don't like using the word generic, but this is, Russia has nukes and is going to start World War III or something. It's so cornball. It's just so uninspiring. The quick time events are crap. Even the last boss fight is a quick time event. The story was so boring. I did not give a shit about anything. The game also has bugs. I didn't even realize the game had bugs because I didn't actually experience any of them, but other people, like, say, Moraduke, I would recommend watching his video on why the campaign is garbage. I'll leave a link in the description. But apparently they've had things, broken objective lists and key events not triggering. I thankfully didn't have any bugs, but still, that doesn't stop it from being garbage. The levels are so boring because it's just point and click. That's what the whole thing is. It's just fucking point and click everywhere. You can't move outside of the boundary. The incredibly limited boundaries, I might add. Flanking? No, that's not really an option. What else is there? The insane amount of cheap deaths in this game. It feels like all the enemies just focus on you and not your teammates. So you'll just step out of cover and get just blasted, which means, back in cover. The amount of times you'll die the amount of times you'll die because you happen to be in the wrong place from some scripted event is actually embarrassing. Battlefield 3 also has like one of the worst FPS missions I've seen in a game, and that's the infamous, I forgot what the mission is called. It's the one where you are in a jet, but you don't fly it. All you do is you look around, spend ages listening to exposition, not being able to do anything, and you basically just deflect missiles and launch them at enemy planes. It's so insanely trash. And I do not believe this, because the funny thing is I watched IGN's review of Battlefield 3, and they even said that was their biggest negative point of the game. They said, the campaign mode. And when I saw that, I was like, maybe it's not going to be as good as the Bad Company games, but maybe I'll still enjoy it. Oh boy, was I wrong. The thing is, I've not played it since 2013 or whenever I gave it a go, 2012, and I'm so glad I did. It's just ridiculous. It is just so fucking ridiculous. And then after that, we got Battlefield 4. Now, basically what I see in Battlefield 4 is basically Battlefield 3 with maybe some slightly more recognizable characters. Although apparently the Battlefield 4 campaign, considering Battlefield 4 launched in an atrocious state, Battlefield 4 had bugs. Lots of bugs in the campaign. I'm sure that there's a video, I think it's called the Battlefield 4 single player experience on YouTube, basically just highlighting all the bugs and weird shit in the campaign. I'll leave a link in the description to that as well, but it's just ridiculous. And all I can see is that, oh, maybe it's marginally better than Battlefield 3, but that doesn't make it worth playing. Like, it's just stupid. I just do not know why those campaigns exist, because they suck. And then we get to Battlefield Hardline. Now, this was the exception, because I picked this up. I mean, I wasn't expecting it to be great, considering how bad campaigns since Battlefield 3 have been generally. But Hardline actually feels like it exists for a reason. It actually feels like it has a fucking purpose. What's to like about Battlefield Hardline? Well, for starters, it has personality. Something I've not seen since Bad Company 2. You know, it's presented as like a sort of like a Netflix drama, as like a cop show, and you have memorable characters. You know, Nick Mendoza, who's a cop with a rough upbringing, trying to do everything right by the law, and you've got Kai, who's in the right frame of mind, but is caught up with the crooked underbelly of the Miami PD. You know, you've got Dorse, who's the police chief. Who else? And you've got some other side characters that, you know, some of them are kind of funny, like the conservative caricature towards the end, but you know, you've got good characters and you've got an entertaining story. I actually enjoyed the story quite a lot. There was quite a few funny moments in there, actually. A few what the fuck moments as well. But anyway, what also surprised me as well is throughout the campaign, like, they actually managed to make some of the environments kind of interesting, which is surprising because considering the type of game it was, I was thinking, oh, okay, it'll probably be just lots of grey buildings. And yeah, there's a few grey buildings, but there's a few interesting places you go to, like how you go to basically a swampland, which I'll admit I didn't like that level a huge amount, but at least it was a somewhat interesting setting. You go to a shopping mall right in the middle of a hurricane. Probably one of my favorite levels is actually where you go to this multi-millionaire's house. Like, you break into his house and it's got this like really funky music in the background as you're doing it. It's just very funny and cool, and there's you'll notice a few Easter eggs in there to other Visceral games. And then there's the gameplay, which, look, the gameplay is funny because you've got the whole police badge thing, which sort of is like this incredibly unrealistic thing of just sneak up behind an enemy, just fleas, and even though they're like, oh, okay, and then they go like, what the fuck? Apparently no one nearby them hears it. It's so ridiculous, but it is satisfying, and even though the unlock system doesn't quite reward your playstyle, it was at least something. It at least felt like Visceral were trying. And I want to stress this, I give Visceral games pretty much all the credit for this. The reason why is because, well, Battlefield 3 and 4 were shithouse campaigns, and I look at Battlefield 1 and Battlefield 5, and to be honest, they look mediocre at best, in all honesty. They look completely superficial and all based around ridiculous heroism. And it's funny, like, you know, DICE haven't made a good single-player campaign since 2010, and since then, the only good one that's come out has been Visceral Games with Battlefield Hardline. And it's amazing that I'm amazed that people were, complaining about the campaign. Like, you're complaining about that campaign of all things. Like, the best Battlefield campaign this generation, without a doubt, leaps and bounds better than Battlefield 3, that's for sure. Did people want something like Battlefield 3 or 4? Who the fuck? What's good about those campaigns? What is good about them? They're ridiculous. I've already explained why they're crap. So yeah, look, I'm pleasantly surprised by Battlefield Hardline. There's even a moment towards the end that reminds me a little bit of Bad Company 1 in its level design, but I'm glad Battlefield Hardline's campaign was worth a damn. I would play this any day over Battlefield 4, and maybe it's just because I'm not into the multiplayer, but At least Visceral tried. At least they tried to do something interesting while still having a good core-based game, from what I can tell. Yet, apparently, people would rather play a game that launched broken on all platforms and also had a shit campaign, in all honesty. And yeah, I don't get it. People were calling Battlefield Hardline a DLC, or like a Battlefield 4 DLC. If that's the case, then Battlefield 4 is a next gen port. Okay, because you look at Battlefield 3 and 4, what's the difference? Even the HUD is the same. It's just with a different fucking color. You know, how the hell do people have the nerve to say Battlefield Hardline is like a Battlefield 4 mod, a Battlefield 4 DLC, and yet you have Battlefield 4, which is so similar to Battlefield 3. They're so similar, they shared the same bugs at launch. Just think about that. I have no idea. Yeah. Look, to summarize the video, yeah, Battlefield 3's campaign is garbage. Battlefield 4 is slightly better, but still garbage. Battlefield 1 and 5, from what I can tell, they look pretty mediocre, and I wouldn't bother playing them. But Battlefield Hardline, you can get it for dirt cheap nowadays, so I would thoroughly recommend playing that, even just for the single player. I know that's weird. I know it's weird for someone to like Battlefield for the single player, but I think it's worth something. It is worth something. And it's a shame that we're not going to get a sequel to Battlefield Hardline, not only because Visceral was closed down by Unichronic Arts, but also because people just for some reason didn't like it, which I'll never understand. Anyway, thanks for listening, guys, and I'll catch you guys next time.